Welcome to the Mind of Business Success podcast. I'm your host, Alicia Cramer. I have Lisa J. Smith, and we are going to get into the psychology, your psychology, sales, how you can get over your fears, get over your insecurities, get a little bit more of that competitive edge, not in a salesy way. We want it to be your superpower.
I love
Welcome to
that.
the show, Lisa.
Thank you for having me.
Sales. Oh man. Everybody wants more of them. Nobody
Yeah.
wants to do it. It's like, let's
Oh my
just
God,
hire
truth.
somebody else to do it for us, right? And then
Absolutely.
I know I'm gonna lead in here with a
Okay.
true story about myself. This is
Okay.
incredibly vulnerable. I, for the longest time, had resistance to the idea of having anyone represent, like be on the front line talking to potential clients and customers on my behalf, like a salesperson, customer service, because I was
Okay.
so afraid of how they would come across to people.
Interesting.
And I know that that held me back for a very long time. And that
Mm-hmm.
was because of my limiting beliefs
Mm-hmm.
of how are people going to think, what are they going to think about me?
Right.
So you're dealing with people all the time in your business,
Mm-hmm.
who want to up their game with sales.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk a little bit about what are you seeing with your clients? Like what are people doing to themselves that they've got to let go of here to actually start to really gain some positive momentum?
Yeah, it's such an interesting question, Alicia, because humans are so complicated, right? And I work in with female and BIPOC organizations every day. That's my core target audience, and all different in B2B professional services, and it's fantastic to see someone leapfrog over their limiting beliefs. But you're right, there's so many, and some of them are so subconscious we do not realize that these are latent in how we approach our business. So we all start a business with this vision and passion, like you did, like I did, right? About the things we want to do and the people that we want to serve. And somehow along the way, we get this idea in our head that if we do sales or business development, whatever you want to call it, somehow we are doing our clients or prospective clients a disservice by having a conversation with them about sales, right? About joining forces. So I see all of the time this whole mixture of catch 22s. Just like you said, I want to grow my business, but at the same time, I'm very hesitant to actually put the time in to do the real work of sales because it makes me feel smarmy, because I'm afraid of failure, because I don't like talking about money. It's uncomfortable to me. I had a really bad experience with a salesperson and it's impacted how I want to sell. I feel like sales is manipulative. I feel like it's too aggressive. You have to be extroverted. It's I have no training. I don't have a process. All of these things are swirling in our heads as we run our businesses and we're, trying to deliver great services to our clients. But you cannot grow and scale without having these conversations, adding new clients, and gaining revenue, right? We're really good at talking about the P&L side of the business, the profit and loss side of the business, but we're really bad about talking about sales. So I spend a lot of time digging into these limiting beliefs and trying to flip people's mindset. I know you are in the mindset, business as well, to get them to understand that these things, although you have had we've all had a bad sales experience, okay? You can't be in life now without that. But that doesn't mean that it's going to translate to who you are as a human, what you're going to sell, and it also doesn't mean that it should hold you back. So I work a lot with leaders, and I find that working with women who are primarily my target, we have this extra baggage. We have societal baggage that we carry for example, we've been taught societally, and I don't care how old you are, and I don't care what ethnicity you are, I don't care what religion you are, we have been taught societally to be small. We don't take up space, right? And when you're talking about yourself and in your story, when your brand is on the line and you didn't want anyone to actually represent you because it was your brand, your what your reputation, what you've built, right? It the stakes seem even higher. And we generally approach life differently than our male counterparts. That's not wrong. It just is. So I find that when working with women, we get very uncomfortable about talking about money. We don't want to be manipulative. But when we reframe the idea that we're actually out in the world helping to transform our prospective clients, right? Like we're doing them a service. If they work with us, we can solve a very big problem, whatever that problem is. When we start to think about that, and everyone talks about B2B as relationship building, like if you don't have to talk like a car salesman, you're not selling a car, right? It starts to open up the dialogue, then we can really dive deeper and get into some of these other limiting beliefs that people are just not even maybe conscious that they have.
I'm sure if everyone were to do an assessment,
Mm,
they would be able to identify several beliefs that are not really serving them all that well.
true.
There are also these other ones that are sometimes not as obvious. Um, Things like you mentioned the money beliefs, right? That's obviously one.
Mhm.
But old beliefs like people don't like me, or
Mhm.
um, what if I'm not the best in my industry?
Mhm.
You hear all these things about imposter syndrome, which affects everyone from brand new business owners all the way up to high level executives.
Mhm.
So as you are working with your clients, they have a clear intention. I want to be better at sales. They
Mhm.
understand why it is important. They obviously are vulnerable enough to put themselves out there and, get help in
Right.
this area where they're struggling. How much of it is sales related beliefs versus more of those like self-image type of limiting beliefs?
Oh, it's 90% our beliefs and who we are and what we're portraying, and 10% sales. It's really, and again, I'm not trying to harp on gender, but for my clients, for women, we undervalue ourselves on every level. We undervalue what we bring to the world. We undervalue our pricing. We undervalue the value we create for our clients when we work with them. And again, this idea of like we're small. I deal with imposter syndrome all the time. I really hate that term because to me, syndrome implies that it's an illness that needs to be fixed and that we're sick. Anyone, irrespective of gender, you're right, it's really about confidence, in my opinion, right? And these things that we deal with, this mindset work that we need to do, are really about building confidence. It's about having the courage sometimes to be able to stand up and say, I am worth something. And that worth will be recognized by the world. But so many things impact your feelings of confidence and worth that often I work through many exercises. And I'm not the kind of coach who is really doing self-help, but because it's related to your company and your sales, I end up working through several exercises to sort of start to reveal what is the biggest thing that's holding you back, right? And I think the difference is there are a lot of programs out there where people or coaches doing amazing work in this space. But some of them are sort of like, I'm going to sell you this package and then you're going to go do it. And I think the better way to approach this is to say, we're going to work on something and create it. Then you're going to implement it. And I'm going to walk the path with you so that when you hit a roadblock, we're going to talk through it. And then you hit another roadblock, we're going to talk through that, right? Because I think when you need to change your behavior, and I have done this as an entrepreneur, I've hired coaches and I've tried to work on, we're all learning, right? Trying to change behavior. You need an accountability partner. And so I find when I'm doing work, being able to create a safe space where someone can feel vulnerable, to your point, enough to say, I sucked at this thing and you need to help me, because women are supposed to be good at everything and we're supposed to solve all problems, right? To say, men have this issue too, but to say like, okay, I didn't do that. How can I be better at that? Or I know I avoided that. We avoid the things that cause us the most pain and friction, right? I know I didn't do the things I was supposed to do. I avoided that. And that obvious is, in my opinion, right now is the biggest barrier, is that we're going to avoid the thing that we don't like. But that's the thing that's going to push us further, is the thing that we don't like. So I totally agree that it's so much about self-worth. It's so much about confidence. But if you don't have someone to help you through when you stumble, that's when it's like over. And then it just reinforces all the things you don't, you thought you were going to fail. I failed. I knew I was going to fail and I failed. Right. So I knew I wasn't good at this. I knew that I wasn't going to be, it's not popularity. I knew people weren't going to like me. All of those things reinforce it. So to have a partner to say, no, don't go there. Don't get caught up there. You have the opportunity. We're just going to do a minor redirect and then you'll be able to like do it again.
I'm going to segue a little bit to a question about role playing.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So, because when I think of being really uncomfortable, role playing.
Yeah.
Oh,
hard.
man. And just so everybody has a little bit of a frame of reference here. So I have a pretty extensive background in sales. I was a telemarketer. Yes, a telemarketer when I was 18 years old, selling garbage bags for like the local fire department. And I knocked it out of the park because I didn't know any better.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I hadn't gotten beaten down by life yet.
Right.
But then you fast forward, and I'm in some other sales roles. I was the store manager for a cell phone company for quite a few years.
Okay.
It's all about numbers, right? It's all about hitting your targets. It's all about
quotas.
hey,
Yep.
bells and whistles, folks, and all of the right shiny pointy
Right.
shoes and all the shit. And I remember so many times the role playing thing, the role playing with the owner of the company.
Oh God, yeah.
When I was doing business development work for that division of my business many years ago, I would go into companies and I would do different types of business development. Sometimes that involved doing like high ticket sales.
Right.
Right. Role playing. They want to interview you and they want to role play with you. And we hear that role playing is so important and it's absolutely necessary. And it triggers so many people. So here you are, you're a sales expert. What's going on here? Do we need to role play? Why do we role play? Is there a way to make it less awful?
That is such an interesting question. No one has ever asked me that. Alicia, I'm so excited about this. Okay. I, like you, I was also a telemarketer when I was in like the 19, so we have a lot in common. I, like you, hate to rehearse. Every time I've had to do a presentation, every time I have to do something, I don't like to rehearse because role playing or any rehearsal in front of a group of people means you're going to be judged, right? I'm the kind of person who's very comfortable being extemporaneous. I do a lot of preparation, but I'll be extemporaneous. But for those of us who need extra planning, we need notes, we need other tools, right? I think it levels up even higher. Role playing levels up even higher because you don't want to be judged. You don't want to embarrass yourself. You don't want to say the wrong thing, right? And I think that there is a place, I don't call it role playing, there is a place for that because I want you to be able to practice in an environment where you don't feel judged so you can see the difference between what happens when you say one thing versus when you say another thing, because words matter. right? Your tone matters, your energy matters. People feel that even over a screen digitally, right? There are ways you can emote. And I think if people don't have the chance to practice, they won't know. How do you know how you're coming off if you don't have a chance to practice? But yeah, there's nothing worse. I don't actually do role playing where there's a script and you have to say this thing or you won't say that thing and then I judge you and I rank you and there's all this criteria. I think that's where it goes wrong. And I've been in so many scenarios like you where it's like, oh God, do I really have to do this? Right? Do I have to get, are you going to really make me do this? And it's like, I start to pit out and I stressful. It's like so it's not comfortable. But I do think if you think about it as let's just practice where you don't feel like you have high stakes. Because what happens on a sales call or in a sales conversation is that you're thinking about the stakes. Oh, I want to be able to pay my employees. I want to be able to pay my bills. I want to be able to launch this new thing. I need the sale. And when we do that, that's when things go awry. When we let all that go and we just have a conversation, we are curious, we ask questions, that's when I think people lean in because they're being seen, they're being felt, they're being heard. But sometimes it takes practice to do that because that may not be a natural, that may not come naturally in the way that you talk. So I agree that the world of sales and sales training has really doubled down on role playing and I don't want to do it. So therefore, I'm not going to make my clients do it. But I do think there is a way to test, in a live way. How do you feel about this when you say this? How does this feel when you do this? In order to make it kind of real for you as the individual as you're trying to make that change. But it's an interesting process because we don't like to be judged.
It is, it's a weird thing.
It's all
It
weird.
is a weird thing, right? So it's like taking a test. So my kids are in school. I've got a 5-year-old, she's in kindergarten. I've got a 14-year-old, he's a freshman in high school.
Okay.
And it's time for those semester finals.
Oh, right.
It doesn't feel good to be put on the spot. Now,
No.
if you've got it aced, if you know it inside and out, and you've got the confidence,
Mm-hmm.
then it's really a non-issue.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have that same degree of performance anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
Now, from the perspective of a sales coach, right? What are some tips that maybe you could give us? How can we be a little bit more prepared? So you mentioned practicing.
Yeah.
Are there different exercises that people can do that really help to make it more subconsciously known so that we don't have that type of apprehension about sales?
Yeah. Great question. So there's a few things I like to use, and it doesn't matter whether you're okay, we use these terms extroverted and introverted, right? And a lot of people, I think there's a misnomer when it comes to sales. The way that I like to frame those ideas, lots of different personality tests, right? All these different things boils down to this: extroverts get energy, they re-energize by being with people, and introverts re-energize by being alone. That's really the basis when it comes to this. So when you have to go out and talk to somebody and network and have a conversation, where I'm going to give you some of these tips, people who typically don't want to be on and are not as comfortable because it drains all their energy being in a room of networking can use some of these tips to help them get through, and then they gain confidence and get better. And extroverts can use these tips to remind them that maybe they shouldn't dominate the conversation, right? Okay, so I like to start by saying use prepare some, you can Google 1,000 of these open-ended questions. Okay, so I'm gonna before I go there, I'm gonna tell you a story for me because I think you were vulnerable earlier. I want to tell you the story. So I was in a sales role. It was 100% commission, and this is very, I would say, I mean, I was in my 40s. Okay, so I'm not like a spring chicken, and I'd never been in a 100% commission job role before, and it was literally like I was desperate to like make a sale. It's the whole total like, eat what you kill. And I was networking with people who had known me for 20 years in different roles. in the community where I lived at the time. And I would walk into the room, and people who knew me for a very long time would part like the Red Sea. They just felt that desperation. They could sense it. And they literally wouldn't talk to me. And I'm like, okay, something's going on. So the reason why I tell you that story is because I said to myself, and what I'm going to, before I get to open-ended questions, the first thing I want to say is let go of the need to make a sale. Just stop thinking about it. Just stop thinking about it. Just meet people and have conversations. I think if you let that go, your whole demeanor can relax and you can be authentically more yourself. So just will you inevitably get in a conversation with someone where it might turn into a sales conversation? That could happen. And you can be ready for that part. But let it go and just be curious about people. So now let's ask open-ended questions. An open-ended question is something where you ask the question and it's not yes or no. The kiss of death is when you're standing in the meeting and you're talking to somebody you don't know and you're both holding some kind of beverage, and you say, do you like what you do? Yes. Well, there's no follow-up. There's no dialogue, right? So if you ask an open-ended question, typically they don't start with why, but they start with how, what, where, all those newspaper kinds of questions. What it allows you to do, especially if you're an introvert, it allows you to sit back and just really listen and let that person talk about themselves. We like to talk about ourselves, right? So if you're curious, can you ask them, what is it you like best about your job? You don't have to talk about what you do, you don't have to have a pitch, the elevator speech. You don't have to do any of that. Eventually, if you're building trust, it does a lot of things in your brain when you do that. The person is feeling seen, they're feeling heard, you're leaning in, you're really listening. It allows you to then ask really great follow-up questions, which is great because you're listening, you're curious. You said this about, your job. Could you tell me a little bit more about that? Right? The more someone gets to then talk about themselves, they relax, they start to build trust, and then they're going to ask you a question. And now you're relaxed. It shouldn't be high tension. You've gotten to know this person. You can ask open-ended questions about anything. It doesn't have to be about their job. Like building trust in B2B is about, well, who are you as a person? Do you have a family? What are your hobbies? What's your favorite music? You could talk about anything to start doing that. So I guess my takeaways are, if you're curious, if you let the sale part go, if you ask open-ended questions, if you do a little homework before you enter a room, like who am I really looking to talk to? Who do I think is my client? Right? Maybe I should talk to those people and not maybe people that may not be my client, because nothing's more frustrating than spending a half an hour in a corner, you're pinned and you can't get out, right? And then you find out this person is not even really, you're a prospective customer anyway. And if you are going to this event for the purpose of eventually building a relationship to have a sales conversation, that's a waste of your time, which is, no one wants to do that. Time is money. So I think that there are simple things that you can do to kind of be prepared in those environments, where then it then boosts your confidence. It then makes you feel like your authentic self. You then get to be who you are. And when they ask you, well, what do you do? Now you can speak with authority. You can speak with enthusiasm. Like, I really love helping people. You mentioned this. You bring them into that conversation, and it's very productive. It's great. So those are a few tips. I have more, but those are a few tips, because at the end of the day, sales is really having conversations with people.
I love it. So sorry, I had to cough, and instead of hitting the mute button, I hit the the video.
That's okay. I just thought, oh no, the internet's going out again.
It's not you. It's not you. That was
okay.
Totally me. No, I love it. I love what you shared there. And there's so much of this is psychological.
It is. It's in your head.
And we don't like to be on the receiving end of someone who is just looking at us as dollars in their pocket.
Oh, no.
It oozes just this gross energy,
and it feeds that bad perception of sales as aggressive. It's smarmy, it's manipulative, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so what you're sharing here is a really valuable mindset shift I know so many well-meaning business owners who don't want to be salesy. They don't want to come across that way, but they're so stuck in their own head, coming
Yeah.
from that sense of lack and I need.
Right.
They're inadvertently being exactly what they don't want to be, exactly what they're
Exactly.
afraid of being. And
Right.
you have to find a way to pull yourself out of that
Yeah.
and get rid of that desperate energy.
Yeah. Here's one more tip I'll add to that builds on that idea, which I love. Simon Sinek, very famous. Everybody knows who Simon Sinek is. Did this really TED Talk with a quote: "People buy your why. People don't buy your how or your what. Those things are important, but that is not what people buy, particularly in B2B, right? So when someone asks you, what do you do? Instead of talking about all the features and benefits, talk about why you do it. It creates instantaneous connection. So the reason why I work with female and BIPOC business owners and leaders is because I want to see them succeed. I want them to have more money so they have more power so that we change the landscape of what business looks like. I want it to be transformed. That is why I do what I do. Sales is a vehicle to do that. When I say that, that is something people like, okay, I want to know more about that. Or they say, oh, that doesn't interest me. And then, okay, I'll move on and talk to somebody else. So I think we get caught up sometimes in that scenario that you just talked about, and some of those like reframing those bad habits. This is how we do it. This is what we do. And they rattle off the services and they talk about their team and they, right? Those things are important. But when you're trying to build an initial relationship, your why is the most important thing that you can relay.
Powerful, powerful tip that you just shared there. That in and of itself is worth listening to this interview. So now this is the perfect time for me to ask how our listeners can connect with you, because you just shared your why, and I'm sure there are people who are saying, I need more.
Absolutely. Well, the easiest way, the thing that I like to do is just connect with me on LinkedIn. So it's Smith Co Sales. So if you search Smith Co Sales, all one word on LinkedIn, connect with me, we'll have a conversation. Ultimately, that's what we're going to try to do, right? Talk to each other, and then we can go from there.
Awesome. Great interview. Love the energy. We covered a lot, somewhat high level. I really do encourage people to connect with you. Take yourself seriously. Sales is an important part of creating a successful business. And if you've got some apprehensions, if you've got some limiting beliefs, if you've got some of your own confidence issues, give that part of you some attention.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, because ultimately you're worth it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that leads me to thanking all of our listeners. You know, we are doing this for you. If you haven't already subscribed, make sure you do so. And until next time, we will see you in the next episode.